Welcome to the Hacks Roundup. Today we'll cover every major Web3 hack in March. We release these videos every month, so make sure to hit that subscribe button and you can catch the next one as soon as we release it. Alright, so in March we've lost over $152 million due to Web3 security incidents. Of that, $47 million was lost due to smart contract hacks. Rug pulls and scams accounted for over $100 million of losses. And finally, compromised private keys accounted for about $4 million of losses. Let's start with the largest smart contract hack in March, which happened on the Curio protocol. Curio focuses on creating markets around real-world assets and IP. Curio is deployed on multiple chains including Ethereum, Polkadot, as well as several EVM-compatible chains. Curio also implements decentralized governance, which formed an important part of this hack. It's also a fork of MakerDAO, but instead of using the Maker token as the governance token, Curio uses its own token called the Curio Governance Token, or CGT. The protocol was hacked on March 23rd for $16 million. The attackers started by locking two CGT tokens into the chief contract. With the locked tokens, the attacker was able to alter the governance system in their favor. And with this enhanced level of control, the attacker was able to initiate a mass minting scheme, thus minting an additional 1 billion CGT tokens. In order to do this, the attacker first approved a malicious contract which acted as an execution library. The attacker was then able to execute arbitrary actions on the Curio DAO contracts by making various delegate calls into the malicious execution library. And the most important action here was the unauthorized minting of the CGT token. So here's a summary of the attack transaction. Basically, the attacker called the cook function on their own attack contract, and the first parameter here is the address of the CGT token. The second parameter is the amount of CGT tokens that they're going to lock into the chief contract, which is really just 2 tokens. All these zeros over here are for the 18 decimal places. So in the first part of this function, the attacker is simply going to lock those 2 CGT tokens into the chief contract. Next, the attacker is going to call the vote and lift functions on the chief contract. Let's have a look at the docs for these functions to figure out what they're doing. So as the name implies, the vote is just going to move the voter's weight from the current slate to the new slate. The lift function, however, is going to check the given address and promote it to the hat if it has more weight than the current hat. So what is the hat? A contract being elected as the hat would be granted permissions to execute whatever changes are necessary. And candidates for this hat role would consist of contracts that will change state under governance. So after calling the lift function, the attacker proceeds to deploy this malicious spell contract, which is what we referred to before as the malicious execution library. They're then going to encode a call to the act function on the spell contract. Next, they're going to call the plot function on the pause contract with that encoded function call. And then they're going to call the exec function on the same contract with the very same parameters. So let's have a look at the documentation for these 2 functions to see what they're doing. The plot function is going to schedule a plan. The plan in this case is to execute or call that act function on the spell contract. However, calling plot will not actually execute the function. Calling exec, however, is going to execute that act function on the spell contract. Here are some other interesting docs on the pause contract. The first part here says there is no way to bypass the delay. However, the attacker was somehow able to set a delay of 0, which generally shouldn't be possible, but perhaps there was some misconfiguration. A plan can only be plotted by authorized users, but the attacker was able to get around this constraint by gaining that hat role. And here is the malicious spell contract that was deployed by the attacker. The most important part over here is the minting of the large amount of CGT tokens back to the attacker. And the losses were spread across multiple chains, including Ethereum and many other EVM-compatible chains such as BNB Chain, Scale, as well as Boba. Let's move on to the second largest smart contract hack in March, which happened on Prisma Finance. So Prisma Finance is a collateralized stablecoin platform. It supports both liquid staking as well as liquid restaking tokens as collateral. Examples of liquid staking tokens include wrapped staked ETH as well as Rocket Pool ETH. Examples of liquid restaking tokens include Renzo's Easy ETH as well as Kelp's RS ETH. Now, locking this collateral allows users to mint MKUSD, which is the stablecoin of the protocol. When you mint MKUSD, it's like you're taking a loan from the protocol, and this debt position is represented as a trove. Unfortunately, these troves were manipulated such that the protocol was hacked on March 28th for 11.6 million. So the vulnerable contract in this case was the migrate trove zap contract, and the most important function on this contract was migrate trove. This function allows a user to migrate their trove to another trove manager in a single transaction. There was another function on this contract, however, which was called onFlashLoan. This was the flash loan callback function. Unfortunately, this function lacked important validation, and this allowed the attacker to close the troves of other users and reopen them with the wrong amount of collateral. So in particular, the attacker was able to find an account which had a huge amount of collateral in their trove, and they proceeded to close that trove and then reopen it with a much lower amount of collateral. So the difference between the original collateral and then the later amount of collateral here is what the attacker was able to steal. And they stole this by opening their own trove and then performing a migration with this vulnerable migrator contract. So the attacker in this case claimed to be a white hat, and they did open up negotiations on chain. However, the negotiations were long and strange because the attacker insisted on asking various questions to the protocol on chain. Next, we have WooFi, which was hacked in early March, and you can see that the TVL of the protocol has dropped significantly since then. So WooFi is a decentralized exchange that uses its own original market-making algorithm known as synthetic proactive market making, or SPMM for short. SPMM tries to simulate order books from centralized exchanges by using spreads and liquidity coefficients. WooFi also uses Chainlink oracles, which work as a failsafe in case the SPMM prices which are calculated deviate too much from the Chainlink price. On March 5th, WooFi lost about $8.5 million on Arbitrum due to a price manipulation exploit. And just 2 months before this hack happened, Silo Finance added a lending market for Woo, which actually made this hack possible. This is because this hack required a large amount of Woo tokens. So as we mentioned before, WooFi uses its own market-making system known as SPMM. So in a WooFi pool, we have the base token and the quote token. In the case of the hack, we're going to deal with the base token as the Woo token and the quote token being USDC. So here is a formula for the new price of the base token after we sell some base token. So here we have P new, which is the new price, and it's calculated by taking 1 minus 2k. K is just a coefficient, and delta B is the amount of base token being sold. P old is the old price of the base token. So what the attacker did in this case is they inflated both the old price as well as the amount of base tokens being sold in order to greatly decrease the new price of Woo. So first the attacker inflated the old price by making a few swaps. They swapped from USDC to Woo to raise this price. And then the attacker made a huge swap where they were selling a large amount of base tokens or Woo tokens in order to raise this value over here. So then both the P old value and the delta B value were greatly inflated, meaning that the new price calculation for Woo was greatly deflated. And finally, since the price of Woo was so low, the attacker was able to swap a small amount of USDC for a large amount of Woo. Let's go over each of these steps. So the first step over here is to inflate the price of Woo. You can see that initially the price of Woo is like 57 something, but then a swap is made from USDC to Woo, so it goes from 57 to 58. And then another swap is made over here, and then it goes from 58 to 59. So the Woo price is inflated in this way. The next step over here is to make a swap in the opposite direction. So over here, we're swapping Woo for USDC. We're selling Woo, which is the base token, but we're selling a huge amount over here. And that means that delta B value is going to be really large. As a result of this, the price drops from this large value over here to almost zero. So many digits are removed from the price. And here is the code which implements the price calculation. The two important factors over here are state.price, which is the original price of Woo, and this has already been inflated. And then we have the base amount, which is the amount of Woo being sold, which is a very large amount. And so since both these values are inflated, the new price is going to be calculated as a very low value. So in step 3, since the price of Woo has gone so low, we can just swap a small amount of USDC for a large amount of Woo tokens. In fact, 1.5 USDC tokens are swapped for 8.3 million Woo tokens. So WooFi is already designed with the Chainlink oracles as a failsafe. The protocol will reject a price if it deviates too much from the Chainlink price. Unfortunately, a failsafe Chainlink feed had not been configured for the Woo token. And since this hack actually relied on manipulating the Woo price, the failsafe could not protect the protocol from this hack. So the exploit was detected by several monitoring platforms, including Hypernative. The team paused the contracts within 13 minutes to prevent any further damage. And the team also offered a bounty to the hacker by sending them an on-chain message. Unfortunately, the hacker has not yet replied. A postmortem was released on the same day as the exploit, and swapping remains paused as of April 7th. The team has deployed or developed new contracts and is currently having them audited. So price calculations are easy to get wrong, and they should always be thoroughly tested, including under unexpected or extreme scenarios such as attempted manipulation. The SPMM design likely needs a few modifications, so it's not vulnerable to this type of attack. Also, recall that the Chainlink price feed had not been configured for the Woo token, so stricter processes can ensure that the failsafe mechanisms are configured for newly supported assets. Also, limits could be imposed on newer or riskier assets supported by the protocol to reduce damage. Let's move on to Super Sushi Samurai, or SSS. Unfortunately, the old version of the SSS token basically went to zero after this hack. Super Sushi Samurai is a GameFi protocol based on Blast. SSS serves as both the utility and the reward token for the game. Users can use SSS to level up their characters. A 2% tax applies when buying or selling the token, however, this tax does not apply on regular transfers. On March 21st, the SSS ETH thruster pool, that's the DEX pool, was drained of $4.8 million worth of wrapped Ether. And the root cause in this case was a self-transfer bug which allowed the attacker to constantly inflate their balance of SSS. And let's demonstrate the inflation of this balance. So here is the transfer function is going to call this internal update function which has the real transfer logic. So the from address and the to address in this case are going to be the same because this is a self-transfer. The amount that's being transferred is the entire balance of the attacker's account. So the first thing that happens is a pre-check. And in this pre-check, we're first going to retrieve the actual balance of the attacker, which is 690 million. And then we're just going to make sure that the attacker is not transferring more tokens than they actually have. And since the balance matches the amount, this check is going to pass. Also, as a result of the pre-check, this variable over here is going to be set to 690 million. Next, the code is going to try and calculate the taxes. However, since this is not a buy or a sell, this is just a normal transfer, the tax apply function will return 0, and so the amount after tax is going to be the same as the amount, which is 690 million. Next, we have a post check over here, and in the post check, what's going to happen is we're going to get the original balance of the attacker and add it to the amount being transferred. So that's 690 million plus 690 million, which adds up to 1.38 billion, and this variable over here is set to that value. Then we have the balance of the attacker being set to 0 because it's being set to this variable minus this variable, both of which have a value of 690 million. However, immediately on the next line, this balance is overwritten to the to balance variable, which we already know is 1.3 billion. So we have a problem here because the self-transfer has resulted in the balance doubling from 690 million to 1.38 billion, whereas what should have happened is the balance should have just stayed the same. So the attacker was able to inflate their balance massively by making many of these self-transfers in the first attack transaction. In the second attack transaction, the attacker made many swaps from SSS to wrapped Ether to drain 98% of the wrapped Ether from the thruster pool. So the two attack transactions were just 45 seconds apart, and the team paused the SSS token transfers within 15 minutes of the exploit. Fortunately, the hacker did return the funds in exchange for a 7.5% bounty, and the hacker even offered to join the team as a security advisor. A brief postmortem was posted on X. The team is also having their updated and existing contracts audited. A new version of the token will be airdropped in late April based on a snapshot at the time of the hack. So the way to prevent this type of vulnerability is by doing thorough testing of the code. There are libraries available with high-quality tests for ERC20 tokens, and this can help developers easily test the generic functionality of their ERC20 token. This leaves them more time to test the specific functionalities of their custom ERC20 token. Also, the self-transfer case should always be tested since it's a well-known bug that has already resulted in so many hacks over the years. If transfers were paused in the 45 seconds between the two attack transactions, a large part of the damage could have been prevented because the liquidity wouldn't have been drained from the DEX pool. However, it's really hard to pause the protocol that quickly in just that much time manually, so some type of automated pausing mechanism would have to be set up in order to do this. Let's move on to some of the other hacks which happened in March. First up, we have Unison, which was hacked on Ethereum for 2.1 million. So on the very same day as the hack, the DEX aggregation contract of Unison was upgraded. The root cause in this case was an arbitrary external call vulnerability. Basically, the aggregator allowed the attacker to pass in encoded transfer from calls to token contracts. And the attacker was able to, in this way, manipulate this aggregator contract into transferring tokens from the victims to the attacker. So the vulnerable contract was unverified, and yet the attacker was able to spot this vulnerability within hours of the upgrade. Next, we have Dolomite, which was also hacked on Ethereum for about $1.8 million. This time it was the legacy contracts of the protocol that were hacked, and this was possible because these legacy contracts still had user approvals on them. Dolomite was a loop ring-based exchange that utilized an order book. So the way it works is users would first approve tokens against the loop ring trade delegate. The loop ring trade delegate is one of Dolomite's contracts which interacts directly with loop ring. Then the user would sign a typed message which would compose an order. Unfortunately, the old version of Loopring did not revert when it was passed invalid orders. Instead, it would just emit an event. So it wasn't easy for Dolomite to detect when Loopring was passed invalid orders. And since it didn't account for these scenarios, the attacker took advantage of this. The attacker submitted invalid orders which forced the Dolomite contract to transfer tokens from the users. Next, we have Mobox on Optimism, which was hacked for $750K. The root cause in this case was the reward manipulation and price manipulation of the Mo token. The borrow function in the protocol allows you to deposit Mo as collateral and then borrow USDT from the protocol. However, each call to the borrow function is going to burn a small amount of Mo from the pool, thus raising the price of Mo. Also, the redeem function lets you repay your loan and receive rewards in the form of Mo tokens. And the bigger your loan, the more Mo tokens you receive as a reward. So the attacker repeatedly called the borrow and redeem functions in a loop to drive up the price of Mo and also receive more Mo rewards. This let them deposit a small amount of Mo as collateral into the protocol and then borrow a very large amount of USDT. Next, we have Blastoff on the Blast chain, which lost about 600K. The future yield Minter vault was hacked in this case and was drained of about 150 ETH. The team closed the vault and fully refunded all impacted users. Next, we have Lava on Arbitrum, which lost 340K. This time, the root cause was the price manipulation of an LP token. This was done by generating fees for the pool by making a large swap. Next, the attacker reduced the supply of the LP tokens by making many borrow and liquidity removal operations. Since the protocol considered the swap fees to be part of the pool assets, the LP token price was calculated to be a much higher value than it should have been. As a result, the attacker was able to deposit a small amount of these LP tokens into the protocol and then borrow all assets from the protocol. Next, we have Zongzi on the BNB chain. This time, the attacker took a flash loan to facilitate price manipulation and as a result stole invitation rewards. Then we have Arc also on the BNB chain. This is another hack whereby tokens were burned from the DEX pool in order to make a large asymmetric swap and drain liquidity. Basically, the attacker called the auto burn liquidity pair tokens to burn tokens from the Pancake Swap pool, and then the attacker was able to swap a small amount of Arc for nearly all the wrapped BNB in the pool. The TGBS hack, also on the BNB chain, was very similar. This time, however, the burn mechanism was by making many token transfers, which burned tokens from the DEX pool and allowed the attacker to make a large asymmetric swap. Let's move on to the rug pulls and scams which happened in March. The largest incident by far happened on Munchables. So the Munchable teams hired a group of 4 developers who turned out to just be a single developer masquerading as those 4 developers. The developer had initially used a malicious, unverified contract implementation behind the Munchables proxy contract. At that point, no one really knew what was happening because this malicious implementation was unverified. And the developer used a function on this malicious implementation to set their own balance to 1 million Ether. Later on, the developer actually upgraded this implementation to a valid implementation and verified it, but their balance, of course, remained the same. Finally, the developer withdrew a massive amount of ETH from the contract. Fortunately, following an intervention from ZachXBT and others, the attacker returned most of the funds, about 60.5 million, and also gave up control of the proxy back to the team. Next, we have a bunch of ERC20 and ERC721 phishing scams on many different chains. These scams resulted in total losses of over 31 million, and there were at least 29 separate incidents of these scams. These scams tricked users into signing transactions involving approve, permit, and increase allowance functions. The largest individual incident resulted in a loss of 3 million. Next, we have an Ansem impersonator who stole about 2.6 million, mostly from Solana, on the Solana chain. The attacker created an X account impersonating the crypto influencer Ansem, and this account was used to reply with phishing messages to users which were interacting directly with the real Ansem's posts. The biggest individual loss from this scam was 1.2 million. Next, we have AirDAO, which lost $1 million of liquidity from Ethereum. The wallet holding the team's LP tokens for the ETH AM pool was compromised through social engineering. The way the attacker did this is they impersonated one of the AirDAO's partners, and this was a trusted partner, and so the team gave them access to the wallet. The attacker then redeemed all the LP tokens in this wallet to remove a huge amount of liquidity from the pool and stole the underlying tokens. Next, we have Ticker on the base chain, which resulted in 900K worth of losses for the users. So the intention with Ticker was to airdrop 15% of the token supply to users. However, the developer instead sold these tokens for 900K. The hacker bridged the funds to Ethereum and spent some of it on NFTs and meme coins. ZachXBT actually identified the hacker on X. However, the hacker was actually unremorseful in his follow-up post, saying things like the users deserve to be hacked. Let's move on to the key compromises which happened in March. First up, we have Mosaic, which lost about 2 million. One of the Mosaic developers went rogue and illegally obtained the private keys of a core team member. These keys could be used to access the security module, which was a failsafe if something went wrong with the vault. Unfortunately, this developer instead used the keys to drain funds from the vault. There were also a bunch of wallet draining incidents on Solana for total losses of over 1 million. Most wallets that have been drained have had their private keys exported at some point, and this is likely when they were stolen. Several compromised wallets were linked to trading bots as well. Next, we have Polyhedra Network, whose wallet was compromised, and this resulted in a loss of 760K for the team. The team's wallet mostly had Theta tokens or THE tokens, which were stolen by the attacker and sold. Let's discuss some of the trends we've seen in March. So for the second month in a row, a self-transfer bug was in the top 4 smart contract hacks. In February, we had the Miner hack. Miner was a ERC404 token. In March, we had the SSS hack, which was a simple ERC20. There were 3 hacks for over $1 million, which exploited user token approvals, including WooFi, Unizen, and Dolomite. There were two $1 million plus hacks which were caused by an arbitrary external call, including Wi-Fi and Unison, and there were another two large hacks caused by insufficient validation, including SSS as well as Dolomite. Overall, there were at least 6 price manipulation hacks in March. So the two top smart contract hacks were both due to vulnerabilities in unaudited code. And this emphasizes the importance of always having smart contract code audited before it's deployed. The next two largest smart contract hacks, that's the third and fourth largest hacks, did involve code that was audited. However, the audit did not detect the vulnerability. And this is why it's so important to always use reliable and reputable auditors. Here are some other interesting facts we noticed in March. So incidents on Blast actually accounted for a huge percentage of the funds lost in March, about 44% and about $68 million worth of losses. And we also saw this when Base initially launched in August. Attackers actually targeted this chain when it launched with both smart contract hacks and scams. So since Blast launched at the end of February, it's not surprising that the chain suffered so many hacks in March. The vulnerable contracts were paused for two of the four largest hacks, including SSS and Wi-Fi. Also, for two of the four largest hacks, this resulted in downtime of longer than a month for the protocol's main functionality. And this was also for SSS and Wi-Fi. So this brings us to the end of the March Hacks Roundup. I really hope you'll join us for the April Hacks Roundup as well. And to do that, make sure you're subscribed to our channel and check out our Twitter account as well for more great security content.